Well, hello. We are here today talking with my good buddy, Ben Swarts of Hardshell Fitness. Ben, how's it going, dude?
It's going great, man. It's going great. It's a beautiful day in Minneapolis.
Yeah. I was just making a little joke that here in Tennessee, we got our first little bit of snow and basically threw my hands up and said, well, I guess that means I have the day off.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, that's what I hear happens in places like that.
yeah, I was going to say, I guess you probably don't really get that excuse in Minneapolis.
Sometimes it slows things down, but it really rarely cancels anything. We tend to just kind of put our heads down and figure out how to keep going.
Right. Well, Ben and I, well, we've known each other for probably 3 years, maybe, and some change.
Yeah.
And it's been one of these kind of on the phone slash social media friendships. And I only just recently got the opportunity to come up and meet you in person and check out your facility and get a little taste of the community that you have built up there over the course of years. And that was a really special occasion. That was a really special event. And we'll be able to share pieces of that with people here soon. But yeah, just to give us some context, tell us what you do up there in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. So just this year, we opened up our first brick and mortar facility in August, and so you really got to come into it when it was pretty fresh. We work with people mostly from the local community, but we've expanded into working with people around the country via Zoom and different ways like that, some remote programming. But we really specialize in working with people who work a typical job, maybe a desk job, who just want to be strong, want to be healthy, want to maybe kind of discover what their body can do, and do that in a safe way and be able to spend their time in an efficient way. So they gravitate to kettlebells because they're, like you and I have talked about, they're a great tool for somebody to get pretty strong in pretty good shape, and learn how to really use their body. They're pretty friendly that way when used correctly. So that's really what we do is old school strength and conditioning. No machines, just a bunch of iron and bars and body weight and knowledge.
Yeah. So speaking of iron, the name of your gym, Frost Iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, so that's a throwback, and I've had the good fortune to have been working with some of my members for about 7 years now, pretty much since we started, and so they could tell you some of these stories as well. But we have up until this year, and actually even this year now with the pandemic, we have trained outside year round, which in Minnesota means we train when it's 100 plus degrees out, and we train when it's well below zero. So Frost Iron comes from multiple times each year when we would go to train and the kettlebells or the barbells would be covered in frost. And so we'd, put on our leather gloves and whatnot and start working with them. And by the end, all that frost is melted and people are also sweaty. So that's really what it harkens back to, is that idea of just, you show up and what you get is what you get, and you can still work with it and adapt to whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I can imagine just by, what you said, where it's like, okay, we're basically training outside. Well, we are training outside, at least in the past iteration of your training setup. Um, that's kind of almost a really cool creative constraint in the sense of like, if somebody is willing to work out in the snow, work out in the heat, then that there's a lot of boxes being checked. Either that, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, they understand and respect and trust you as a coach and in the methodology of the training. And like, that's what they're after. And they're obviously experiencing and seeing good results. And Yeah, that's cool. And I think it kind of flies in the face of a lot of times of like what we're tempted to do is just make things so perfect and pristine and cushy for everybody all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But there's also something to be said about when people are putting like real skin in the game, and they know that they're undergoing some level of discomfort or sacrifice of comfort just to get their workout in. And I think that sets a good tone. That sets a good theme for strength training in general.
Yeah, I think you're right on the nose there. And I'll tell you what, the people who I get to work with have the best attitudes. I mean, because their priorities are figured out. They show up with the expectations that we've built around, for themselves, and the expectations that they know I have of them to show up and do their best, basically, with consistency and attention, right? But something that you just mentioned brought up, there's a running joke in our crew that what we do is luxury fitness, right? Because to your point, like all these fitness centers are opening that are like, they've got like 4 spas and 2 bars and a restaurant and like 100 treadmills, and like each one's got its own little fan, like there's all these like ways to make fitness more comfortable for people, to make the exercise more comfortable. And I think that's great because it does lower lower the barrier for some people to actually go and move. But for instance, when we were training in my garage here, which we'll talk more about later, on one of those hot days, I had 2 squat racks set up in front of 2 windows. One of the windows had a fan in it, just a normal box fan blowing air in, and the other one didn't. And so they started to give me crap on the one. They said, "Well, where's our fan?" And so I went in and I pulled the one out of my house and brought it out and hooked it up on the spot. And they said, "Well, it's luxury fitness now, right?" And I'll tell you what, it was a whole lot more comfortable just from that small change. But that's the idea, right? Is like, let's work with what we got and recognize that we can recognize that we can adapt to the environment, and it changes our programming through the seasons. It changes a lot of different things when you're wearing bulkier clothes or whatever, and trying to train. Same as when it's really hot, right? You need to take a few more rest breaks and make sure that you can create the correct environment for people to still be safe and have a meaningful stimulus for what they're after.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I I assume I can really imagine that having to be resourceful in that way has made you an even better coach, an even better trainer, having an even keener eye for all this stuff. Because I mean, now that I think about it, I mean, I've never really had to deal with like any of that stuff. I mean, even, you know, I've never had to train outside. And I guess the closest I've ever really come in terms of like having the environment be a problem is on the rare occasion when like the studio is cold first thing in the morning, but at least we have a roof over our head. So yeah, so that's cool. And that also, like you said, it creates a very unique sense of community and camaraderie when everybody just knows that they're in the same situation. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing or like a super hard challenge, but at least there's a little like, wink wink nudge nudge, nobody else has the gall to come out and do this, that we do. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, just from Jump Street, that certainly weeds out a certain type of person and it attracts and retains another type.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no surprise that a lot of the people that train with me are also people who enjoy spending time in the outdoors. They enjoy going hiking and things like that. So they're pretty familiar with the elements. But it's a really, like I said earlier, I feel grateful every day for the people that I get to work with, just because they're. I mean, you met many of them. They're really cool, open-minded, like strong human beings who really want to learn how to do this stuff and really embody the values of what we do. So then you throw a healthy dose of the kind of all over the place Minnesota weather on there, and you get quite an environment to work with. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, right on, man. So obviously, we're in a tricky time right now. Recording this in early 2021. We've got, quarantine and social distancing considerations. You've got your own facility now, which is great. Like you said, you're also doing a lot of stuff on Zoom, online. But and just like how you said, it's funny, you've never done anything, you've never had the luxury of doing everything the traditional way. So this is just another step in uh, being able to call upon your resourcefulness. But take us back. How did you get started in fitness? What was your first gig, so to speak?
Yeah. So, I mean, me personally, my first experience with lifting weights was when I was like 12 at the Y. My mom, I think she just wanted to get me out of the house. So she sent me down there. Let's see, that'd be 24 years ago. She sent me down to the Y to take the class so that I could use the weights down there. So I was so young that you had to learn, all the ways. And I still remember some of the lessons, which is kind of cool. It was like how to load the plates and, all the things that we teach people every day. But I didn't really use it a whole lot. I was more into climbing trees and stuff like that. So, I mean, my exposure to fitness was really, really early, but I didn't really start doing it consistently myself until I was, 18, 19 in college. I swam a lot in high school and was very active that way, but didn't really lift or do anything. So, um, in college, I learned how to lift a little better. I had some good friends who were like big into like bodybuilding, so they were really good with form and like teaching me what muscles did what and all those things. Um, but then after college, I decided to start working more with kettlebells. I'd been exposed to them in a class and instructed in basically how to use them, but I wanted to get more information because I had noticed how much they helped me at the time I was doing judo and stuff like that. And I tell you what, if you're in a grappling sport, kettlebells are pretty hard to beat as far as what to use for strength, conditioning, everything, because of the grip and because of a lot of the tendon and sinewy kind of muscle that you can really build. Grappling with a 100-pound bell, when it's swinging around, translates really well to fighting another human, turns out.
Right.
So a lot of big forces at work there. Um, so I decided to take the HKC through Dragon Door, and I did that, and that was like a whole nother level of as when you get instructed by someone who knows what they're doing, all of a sudden this tool becomes a lot more useful. So at that point, I did that, and I started working with some people at my workplace at the time. We had a group of about 8 to 10 people who wanted to train. So we just used one of the classrooms, and I hauled I bought like 15 cheap bells on Amazon that were good enough. I still have some of them, 7 years later, all chipped up and beat up, but they still work. And I'd haul those in at the end of the workday, and we'd train, and I'd haul them back out 3 times a week, all the way in from the parking lot, all the way back out. So we did that. And I think my first experience actually was working with my girlfriend at the time and 2 of her friends from school in a park nearby. So again, we'd bring the bells, I'd haul them out there, we'd train and haul them back. We'd hang, suspension trainer from the tree and just run a little miniature class once a week. So, we started there, and I've never actually done any marketing for my business. So it's always been word of mouth. It's always been, people bring their family members, which I know you and I have talked about is one of the greatest compliments you can possibly get is not only when someone keeps coming back themselves, but when they bring their loved ones, like that hits different, right?
Yeah.
It's really meaningful. And so, I mean, man, over the years, I made my business just pay for itself. I didn't take any money out of it. I just kept educating myself, kept buying books, kept buying equipment. And we trained, we trained in the parks in the summer, in the fall, and the spring. We picked different ones, and we kind of were nomadic that way. And I had groups of up to 15 people, so this was
Wow.
actually a pretty significant enterprise at one point. which, you know, when I was talking about some of the legalities, to this day, I'm not sure if I should have had a permit to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, probably. But, you know, we did that. We trained in parking lots. I rented out a church, little gymnasium, a little old gymnasium for a while as part of a church for the season. But we were always hauling the bells, right? Always bringing the bells in and out to the point where we made it part of the workout, right? So it would be, you know, go get the bells and bring them in. And we were doing carries just as part of the warm up. It only took me a couple years to realize I could do that. And I didn't have to do it all myself. Because I'm like, I'm here to serve them. I'm going to have it all set up when they get here. And then finally Onum's like, man, why don't you just wait? There's like 10 of us. We could do this in 2 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds all right.
Farmer carry cool down.
Right. And in those days, I'll tell you, I was bringing the kettlebells in at night in the winter. I'd bring them into my house so that they'd be warm. In the morning, I'd bring them up, put them in my car, drive to the spot. We'd bring them in so that the handles were warm. Because that's the biggest challenge with training in the cold, is that your hands get so cold, right? And so all that, we trained alongside fields. We jumped fences to use baseball diamonds. I mean, we did all sorts of stuff just to find space around the cities here. And then when I bought my house let's see, it would have been late 2014 or summer 2014, I made the garage here into a gym. And so all of what I just described happened over like a year and a half, give or take. We were just all over the place. And then once I made this space into a gym, that's when we could really kind of have a home base. And my dad came and we built an Olympic lifting platform, and I bought a Rogue half rack. You know, I invested about $1,000 in a barbell and stuff like that. I went from, I bought another set of kettlebells. So, you know, I bought the doubles from the, 4 kilo up to the 48 kilo kind of setup. And now we're in our bigger space, you know, after training here for 5 years in my garage just out back. 380 square feet is what we had, plus my driveway, which is where the frost iron piece comes in, because all my bells just sat out there and it's an unheated garage. After all that, now we've got a spot about 2 blocks away. It's an old gas station. It's an old Phillips 66 that we converted into a gym. So it's about 1,100 square feet. We've got 120, 130 bells, racks, everything that we need. And, it wasn't ideal opening during a pandemic because I haven't really been able to use it. We're limited to 25% capacity. But, once we're able to open it up, we can have groups of up to 20 people in there. You've seen the space. It's going to be a cool kind of work together, give and take kind of vibe that we're going to get going. Sharing bells and all those things once we can, because I think that's really crucial too. But that's the down low, the quick and dirty of kind of what we did. I'll tell you, those of you who are just starting out, I didn't really make a dime off the business for 4 years because I was reinvesting everything I could. So this was all alongside working my 1 or 2 other jobs to continue to pay my bills as well. But it's a pretty cool way to do it, because once we were able to launch bigger, not only did I have all the equipment, but I didn't have to take out a massive loan to buy it all.
Yeah, and you had built-in clientele, right? Resourcefulness and having that long-term perspective is so key in this industry, where you're essentially working for yourself, no matter what environment you may technically be in. As a trainer, as a service provider, you always at least have some form of entrepreneurial responsibility to shoulder. And that's it. It pays off, because overall, that you could say, like, those fledgling or those building years, you were doing the stuff that really counts over that long term, which is investing in yourself and your education. And really, again, going back to this whole idea of like training in places that aren't, so pristine, like you certainly have to make up for it by actually being really good at training and at coaching,
Mm-hmm.
because the only, nobody's going to nobody's going to break into the baseball field to train with some half-wit trainer.
Right. Not more than once anyway.
Right.
Yeah, man. And that is so key, is how you build that community, right? How you work with people and really like having the knowledge, of course, to having the toolkit and understanding how to use it. But like, I mean, our industry is really one about serving people, about working with people, and meeting them where they're at. We talk about with what I do, I call it like human first, right? Like treat somebody like a human being first, because they may come to you after the worst day of their life and they still decide to show up, or they might show up and be like, I just got engaged, I'm so excited. And training them is going to be vastly different. Holding space for somebody to grieve for 10 minutes at the beginning of their 45-minute session and understanding that that's okay, right? Because they've got to be in a state that their body's ready to accept whatever it is you're going to do, being able to change it on the fly and work with that human. And I really look at it as co-creation, right? Like we're working together to create this environment, both internally and then also how that interplay happens. But as far as building a base and building a clientele, I can trace like up until we launched this larger spot and more of the community started to see it and ask about it. I could trace like probably 80% of my clientele back to like 2 people that I worked with, just through kind of like the family tree style where so-and-so talked to so-and-so talked to so-and-so. And you never know where those conversations that you've had, I mean, some of these things popped up like 2 years later, where someone would finally reach out and say, oh, I meant to reach out a couple of years ago because my friend was training there, but they didn't forget. So when they were ready, they reached out, right? So it's really fascinating as you do this longer and longer. I think there's in the industry right now, there's all these things like clout and all these things like getting out there and like kind of showing off and being what it's about. But I mean, you can't beat that word of mouth. You can't beat that person who says, hey, this changed my life. This is a great group of people. This is what I want to be part of, and you should too, right? So
Yeah, there's nothing that beats that. And the fitness, the exercise science, so to speak, of fitness is almost the least interesting part of it to me.
100% true, brother.
Yeah. It's being able to supply that what do they call it, the third place, the third space, work, home, and
Sure.
Starbucks would like to say the coffee shop, but
Right.
um, yeah, so having that perspective to really be human first is so key. And that's nothing against these big franchised group training facilities. I think that's a great option for probably a lot of people. But yeah, I also think it could be limiting to like the new trainers perspective for what's possible, because a lot of the whippersnappers, so to speak, that I chat with, it's like there is really no goal or ambition past like I don't like running or operating the next like churn them in, churn them out, group class gym. But that's so limiting, because the real special part of this job is what you're able to do yourself, crafting that, or co-creating, as you say, co-creating that experience with individuals one-on-one, with small groups or even large groups, but ultimately it kind of comes down to creating that from a place of your own experience, not necessarily what you've read out of a book or what, some suit has told you to do. And that's just a process that takes, as we know, years
Yeah.
to really flesh out. So there's some sacrifice on the front end, but it's kind of like the entrepreneurial cliche. If you make some of those hard decisions in the moment for the first few years at least, then it makes the whole rest of your career maybe not that much more easy, but certainly that much more, fulfilling and full of potential.
Yeah, yeah, and there, something really important you touched on there I've always felt like my career is kind of interesting because I never worked at a big box gym. Like I never did any of that. I just completely, I didn't like any of the ideas around it, so I just didn't do it. So I didn't, because like that's, kind of where you cut your teeth, learn how to talk to people and all of those things. You build up your clientele. I have friends who build up their clientele and then they leave and do their own thing, right? And some of their clientele come with them, and that seems to be kind of what people do. Um, I have been told sometimes I have a problem with authority, not in like a, I'm gonna like cause problems in my workplaces or anything. Because I agree with being a valued member of a team, but I don't like to do things the way that a lot of people do them or the way that has been traditionally done. And so those are the kind of people I attract as well. But I've had the benefit of having some incredible mentors in my life. And those are people who you can, to your point, it takes you years to really learn how to do what we do well, I would say. But in those years, if you've got some people to bounce ideas off of, or even just be around and kind of do the sponge thing and absorb and kind of learn how they do them, or even conversations, I mean, that whole iron sharpens iron thing in the beginning is really, you're just kind of hanging out, listening and learning and like, hey, what do you do if somebody's knee does this? Like those kind of like little things that then you can start to look at the larger principles and do that. So, I paid a heck of a lot of money sometimes for those things. Sometimes I was fortunate enough to just have people who I ran into and we hit it off and we were able to communicate that way. But it's been really something I've been thinking about lately, whether we're talking entrepreneurship or coaching. Finding somebody to help you out with it can really save a lot of struggle. And I'll always be an advocate for struggling yourself, because that's sometimes the most painful lessons, the most challenging lessons are the best ones, right?
Sure.
But I forget where the quote came from, but it's something to the effect of, you got to learn from other people's mistakes because you won't live long enough to make them all yourself.
Yep.
And
Right.
I don't remember, it's paraphrased, I don't remember where it's from, but that I think of that weekly because I tend to just like lone wolf it and be like, I'm going to figure it out. 10 minutes later, I'm making a phone call. Hey, so-and-so, what do you think? So,
I broke it. What happened?
yeah, exactly. Like, so I started going down this path and it is not what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
man. And that's the beauty of, that's the beauty of the written word. I mean, of all the books that, obviously that we have, access to. Because, it's funny because I listened, I forget where it was, maybe a podcast or maybe an audiobook, or it was the same thing. Like, a book is oftentimes just a collection of the author's mistakes that they don't want you to make.
Ooh, yeah.
Something along those lines. And now that we have the internet and the opportunity to network with peers and colleagues and mentors, and people who have gone down the path, people who are coming up on the path, and those who are right alongside you. It's just so important that you simultaneously, speaking to your point, you're action oriented, you want to do things yourself, and also on the other side, get that, get that knowledge in whatever way makes most sense to you from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big
Yeah.
reason why I want to get back into podcasting. I go through these phases over the past probably 3 or 4 years. So hopefully this is a phase that lasts a little bit longer. But I mean, that's kind of one of the big reasons why I like to do, if not like official podcasts, and just chatting with people on the phone. You and I have had a really cool, really amazing conversations over the years, that just always helps to refine my own thoughts just by communicating what's going on in my own life and business, and then I'm sure vice versa. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's an art and a practice that we probably should all be very um, diligent and conscientious with, and try to make it a consistent practice. And again,
Yeah.
that's why I'm glad to have friends and colleagues like yourself.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, that's obviously mutual. We've talked about that over the years, and I think something important to recognize too is like, as you consider who you're gonna read, who you're gonna talk to, who you're gonna have in that network. At first I was, you go to the names that right? You go to the names that pretty much everybody knows. A few that I can and rattle off, and people I've actually met. Dan John, Marty Gallagher. A lot of the Dragon Door crew that I've met. A lot of people know who they are. There's a lot of great information there to learn from. But as you continue to evolve, those lessons, they kind of do the Bruce Lee thing, right? You absorb what's useful, reject what's useless, and then you apply these principles that you see throughout the whole thing, and you make something your own. You make it uniquely your own. And I have found that as I do that, I also have become not necessarily more careful about what I consume, but I can keep that beginner's mind and continue to learn, while also kind of recognizing some of the things in the fitness industry more for what they are right away. Right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, that's a marketing tool. That's a marketing ploy. It's just this in a different way, right? Or that's the same thing everyone should be doing, right? Like they just put a sticker on it.
Right.
Um, at the same time, as you like, part of the reason that I always look forward to connecting with you is not only does it help to, like you said, really like clarify and sharpen, my own ideas, my own thoughts. And I mean, we've come up with some really neat ideas that may not have existed otherwise. But also, like, I get a lot of energy from talking to you. Like afterward, I feel like I've just been drinking cups of coffee. Like I'm almost like jittery, which is pretty cool because that doesn't happen with everybody. Um, so as people are looking at their networks and figuring some of this stuff out, like pay attention to how you feel. I think it was Max Shank who said, how do you feel before, during, and after doing something, right? And so I
Hmm.
anticipate this. I have a great time while we're here, and I feel fantastic after. That's probably a green light. Like, let's just do that all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that also applies to like the workout, the training session. Both, like, let's say, just maybe using like personal examples, like how we approach our own training, and then also how we're facilitating those same feelings to our clientele. you
Hmm.
know and again, with being human first, and this goes for every service provider, every trainer. It's like, have you ever thought about what your client is thinking and feeling before their workout? How
Hmm.
about during? And how about after?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm sure you've noticed as you work with people you've worked with for years versus brand new people, the establishing of the fact that like it's safe to be honest with you, and building that rapport of like, you can come in and say, I don't want to train today. Like, I don't want to be here. That's fine with me because you're still here, right? And so sometimes we can start there, And, you'll say, I don't want to be here, but I know I'll feel better at the end, right? That kind of conversation is really important to have, and have people be honest, because that's going to change some of my approaches, right? How we're going to work together to do this. With some people, I know that means we need to kind of jump into it, or they're not going to really do it. For some
Right.
people, that means we need to start real slow, maybe with like a couple of like loaded carries, and just kind of like have a conversation while we do it, right? Um, so yeah, being able to have that actual like kind of more intimate connection is really important, because if I'm being authentic and you're being authentic, this is real. This is like, we can make really good decisions based on the conversation, based on the interaction. If there are things being held back, then we have to guess, and it leads to this kind of weird spot that is certainly not optimal. So, with everybody who comes in, I literally will say, how are you doing? And sometimes I'll repeat it 2 or 3 times, because, in Minnesota, at least, everyone just says, fine. If someone says something other than fine, it's noteworthy. So like if they say, I'm okay, it's like, ooh, just okay. That's the next question. Just okay, right? Because people here, like, everyone's very stoic. Because
Right.
if you're not like in the little group, like, it's not your business. It doesn't matter. It's a very like Nordic thing, which I realized when I spent some time in Sweden years ago. I was like, oh, this is why we are this way. Like, everyone's walking with their eyes down, just like doing their thing. But when I say that, my clients know I mean it. Like, how are you? And this week, with the things going on in DC, I mean, it's been a great example of how are you? And people say, well, I'm not good. Or, well, I'm fine, all things considered. Or, well, I'm really upset because I'm scared, because I'm really marginalized usually, and this is a lot going on. So having those conversations, spending 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes can make or break the session, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because man, I think we can agree there's a lot going on right now. Like you said, it's early 2021. Oh boy. Oh boy. We're gonna look back on some of these videos and be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of another reason why I have gotten a little extra wild hair about getting back into these podcasts, because I think it'll serve as an interesting time capsule. And again, last time I was really on this kick was about a year ago when quarantine first happened. So
Sure.
the practice of really checking in with somebody at the beginning of a session is a great micro example of the macro example that we were just talking about being human first, about developing, your skills and your methodology as a coach that will help your career for the long term. Same thing here. Checking in with your client in whatever way that means to you is going to make the rest of your time together, both in that session and again over the term of the coaching relationship, that much more valuable, that much more impactful, that much more special, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's just another example of the same idea of taking the time to really put that human first idea at the forefront, and then using the fuel or the momentum from that to either fuel your entire career over the span of years and years, or just to fuel a workout over the course of an hour. So I think it's interesting how that pattern plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what you did there is, of course, you saw the principle of it, right? Here it is. Cool. And as you know from training, I mean, principles are everything. Like, it's once you understand the principles of training, and you've got your set of values, and these pieces, and then you've got your toolbox, right? Like, one of the reasons that I love working with you and having you build my workouts is that your toolbox is incredible. It's vast. And so you bring up movements I have never even seen or thought of before after doing this for all these years and attending all these seminars. And I can see where they fit, right? Like I can see based on the principles of this stuff where they fit, and then I'm able to take that for my clients as well. But I would say, like, any good coach, like that's something to really look for, is like, what are the principles of what we're doing versus like this specific movement or this, like, well, the barbell's the best thing, so we need to use the barbell all the time. Well, why is it the best thing? Is it the best thing for this person right now, right? Like what are we actually doing? What's the goal, right? Like Dan John says, keep the goal the goal, right? So there's all these different pieces that, whether it comes to interpersonal relationships, which is again really what personal training is, and group training is those relationships, or the entrepreneur side, the business side of things, or the actual like physicality of the training and the programming and methodology, modality stuff. I mean, it's all these big buckets, right, that you can start to recognize the more you do it. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to see. That's one of the things I look for with people who do what we do, is like, what kind of language do they use? And then you see some of the people who've been doing this for like 50 years, and they're even further. They've come full circle to be like, this is the right thing. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, actually in that context, that one thing is the best thing. Like,
Right. Yeah. There's an interesting balance of ego, I think, that happens, over the course of time. Because it's like, I think if you operate from principles, then your ego doesn't have to make up the difference. Because we see this all the time in every domain of human existence, but obviously, especially like for fitness, like I'm staking my ego, I'm staking my name, my reputation on XYZ, fill in the blank. And if you don't catch yourself doing that, then your identity becomes attached to it, your ego becomes attached to it, and then you experience a lot of cognitive dissonance. And then when that happens, again, if you don't know how to handle it, things can spiral in weird directions.
Right. Comes out sideways.
Yes. But if you can if you really understand and you can really put your trust in principles and be willing to modify or change or drop certain principles over the course of time, then you really prevent a lot of problems from happening in the first place. And that's the only thing I can really hang my hat on, is that I try to get the big ideas, the macro ideas down in as much of a foolproof, obvious way as possible. And then it's just a matter of experimenting with their application.
Yeah.
And that's how you can kind of that's how you can, as a coach, that's how you can develop a huge toolbox. Because I think the kettlebell is a good example. You can have a set of like very simple, maybe easily graspable principles and concepts, and you can just apply them a million different ways to the kettlebell, or a million different ways to bodyweight training, or any other tool that you can think of. And then you just sprinkle other other ingredients into the mix, and this is how you can come up with different training ideas for different people on the fly. And I think whether or not we even think in those terms or not, I think once you're in the game of coaching for long enough and you coach enough people, then I think a lot of these things kind of work themselves out automatically out of necessity. Because if you keep, if the low bar back squat is for everybody, then and you're training enough different sorts of people, you're going to hit your head into a brick wall a couple of times, and somebody's getting hurt, one way or the other. So a lot of this stuff just comes from time in the field and working with different people, with different goals.
Yeah. Well, and you said a couple of really key things there, and having watched you coach, my people when you came up for a seminar, which I'm wearing the shirt from, I found it to wear, so it's pretty great. Got both our organizations on here, which is
Dude,
sweet.
that's what I thought. I should have worn mine.
That's all right. I actually forgot that I had the shirt, and I was looking for another shirt to wear, and then it popped up. I was like, sweet. But when you're up here working with people, the things that I always reiterate to myself, but I really saw you employ, was one, when I was out training at the Kabuki Strength Lab, as I went out to their big seminar a few years ago in Portland. They talked about don't use words when a drill can do it instead, right? So and I think of that as speak the language of the body, which is movement, right? Like bodies learn from movement. Now, if we're lucky, we can verbalize something that they take in and creates movement, right? We can cue effectively. But the best cue in the world is the one that's going to get them to do what needs to be done, what needs to happen. And if we can use a drill to teach that feeling instead, big thumbs up. And you're really good at that, right? You were really good at building a lift based on here's the drills we're going to do. Okay, all those things go here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and that's that principles idea, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm just making stuff up. I'm just yeah, this works, and I'll try something myself to make sure it does what I think it'll do, and then hand it over.
Yeah, dude. Well, first of all, thank you very much for saying that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And honestly, I think it comes from years of my words falling short, especially when I try to use too many of them.
The necessity part you mentioned, right? In too many words. Yes.
Yeah. I get myself into more trouble saying too much sometimes, especially in training. And, I remember when I came up there, we were having a conversation around how what's going on physically in the body and with what we're going after with training it's so hard to put into words sometimes.
That's right.
And I remember us having that conversation where I was struggling, and I was like, there's all these things that I'm thinking, that I'm feeling, that I'm experimenting with in my training, but I really can't say what they are. It's like I really don't have the words. So applying that to coaching, I don't want my words to get in the way. It's almost like the difference between reading a book and playing the story in your own mind versus watching the movie. And what does everybody say? The book is always better than the movie.
It's always better.
Because the book mixes with your internal experience and your internal perspective, and you're creating it as you read. The movie is just kind of blasting out at you. So I think about the same thing in training. It's like, how can I, instead of trying to get you to parrot something logically, with a bunch of words, and then muscles try to match words, it's like I don't know. But if I can get the point across in as few words as possible, so that you fill in the blanks yourself with your own experience, with your own perspective, that's how you can get the most out of what little I have to teach.
That is big. I love that. I'm glad that's encapsulated here. That's really cool. You've definitely the reason I said it's cool to see the evolution in your thinking since we had that conversation in October, right? Because that's more what you were getting at. And so it's cool that was well done. Very cool. I'm going to think on that throughout the day.
Thanks, man. Don't think too hard about it.
Well, if I think too hard about it, it'll defeat the purpose, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, man. Good stuff. Well, hey, I tell you, I certainly want to be respectful of your time, you know, but I also wanted to ask about Thrive Mighty, and if you would share what you guys are up to with that.
Yeah, I got a couple minutes here. I actually have a Zoom client at noon, so I'm on the
Whoops.
wire. So I'll
Hey,
tell
we
you
might
what
have to
though.
save that for round two.
Well, we could do this as a teaser and then
Okay.
round two. So Thrive Mighty is a community we're building throughout the nation, but headquartered here in Minneapolis in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, where we bring people with and without disabilities, people of all abilities, together to experience our own wellness, to learn about our own wellness. So some of it's fitness. That's obviously kind of where I live. But we also do things around sexuality for all abilities. We do things around stewardship and nature, financial wellness, meditation, spiritual wellness, all those things. So it's been awesome. We are in three years in now, and we've become a powerful little organization. And it's going to be cool when this pandemic's up because we're using this time to build the infrastructure to really grow and get more people on board to handle more tasks and serve more people with deeper programming. So that's the teaser, right? And I've got a whole bunch of notes that we can go down whenever you want, sir.
Right on, dude. Yeah, well, let's do this again real soon. There's obviously lots more that I would love to chat about. Thrive Mighty, stuff that you're doing in your training, um, things that we might be doing in your training in the future.
I
So,
was gonna say, I look forward to getting to pick your brain about some of this stuff.
yeah, dude. Cool. Well, yeah, let's leave it there. And yeah, man, I just want to say how much I appreciate your friendship, the example that you're setting as a coach, and as a human being. I'm really grateful to have you in my circle, and I'm just looking forward to our next conversation, but b the next time I get to come out and train with you.
Yeah, man. Well, Zach, same from my end to you. You know, it's no secret. Love you, brother. You're a good man. And thanks for this opportunity. It's been a ton of fun. I feel charged up. I feel ready to go. So,
Right on, dude. Well, hey, bro, love you back, and we will chat again real soon.
all right. Take care, man.
Peace.